All right, welcome everyone who is tuning in here to the Founders Forum. I'm Angela Ruggiero, the co-founder and CEO of Sports Innovation Lab. I'm psyched today to have Paul Rabil. I am going to walk you through his bio in a second. But just so you know, for those viewing on any of our social streams, this is a hackathon. We are hacking to bring sports back. We've got 23 different countries represented in this hackathon, people from all over the world, trying to understand and deliver solutions, ideas around before sports has fans in the stands, before we're able to actually come together. What are the ways we can keep sports relevant, keep it exciting, and come out of this even better than we've been in the past? So a lot of great ideas kicking around right now. I'm excited to see at midnight tonight all the submissions. So thanks again for everyone that's participating. As I mentioned, you'll be able to ask some questions here. But without further ado, I want to introduce Paul Rabil, who's an advisor to Sports Innovation Lab. He doesn't need an introduction. He is, as you know, a professional lacrosse player who co-founded the Premier Lacrosse League, which was ranked top 10 most innovative companies by Sports in Fast Company. PLL very quickly figured out, look, if we could take the world's best players, create a tour-based model. I'll let him speak more in depth on that, on the new format they have, but get major corporations and groups behind this. It's a killer way to take lacrosse to the next level. So you've got an athlete who MVP, collegiately, professionally, two-time world lacrosse champion with Team USA. He's pushing to get lacrosse in the Olympics. Used all of that. Sport Techie actually named him the most tech-savvy athlete on the planet. This guy knows tech. He's a freaking MVP, and now he built a league. So I'm so pumped, Paul, that you're able to join us. Thank you so much for spending the time with our guests, and we're going to get into it.
Thanks for having me, Angela. It's always great to connect with you. Going back probably 4 years now when we first met, and then I was scrambling to get you on my podcast. We were co-advisors in a wearable technology platform called the MC10, and here we are. A bunch of years later, you graduated, got your MBA from Harvard, and I was always saying, how can I catch up to Angela? So appreciate that intro.
Yeah, and if you guys haven't checked out Paul's podcast, Suiting Up, that's one. You have another one. I mean, you're like everywhere. So we'll get into that.
I sound neurotic, actually.
I don't know how you have the time, but you make it. So let's dive in. Give everyone a quick overview of PLL, and then sort of where you were last season as you launched, and where you're headed. Because I think a big reason we really are excited you're on today is the fact that you're actually having a season this summer. One of the first leagues to declare that, quarantine, fanless. But tell us about PLL, why it's different to begin with, and now where you're headed this summer.
Yeah, so appreciate that. And I think the reason, which we'll get to, why we were able to be the first team sports league in North America to roll out a solution during this COVID-19 pandemic, it goes back to our entrepreneurial spirit and our innovative strategy around like the context of the league that we built, which goes back to 2017. Mike and I kind of thinking really deeply, and Mike's my older brother. He's a co-founder and CEO of our business, and he's a serial entrepreneur, Silicon Valley previously, and now we're both in LA, where we decided to put our HQ. But we looked at the industry, sport industry, as one that was exploding over the last decade, primarily because of new media and new media being social, and the attention that's driving the value of attention top down, from networks to sponsors to ticket acquisition to merchandise. And we're seeing a lot of the traditional broadcast networks invest more and more into sports. We're seeing social media platforms invest in live sports, also original programming in sports. We're seeing networks like Barstool pop up and have a wild success around content to merchandise strategies. And so all of this attention around the focal point of gameplay. And what we were, and what I had experienced over just over a decade of playing professional lacrosse, is we had a sport that we had always said has product market fit. 2.5 million participants, 10 million fans, There's now over 60 countries that participate and are sanctioned, as we got provisional recognition you alluded to by the IOC just last year. And yet the sport hasn't excelled at the professional level. And that was frustrating for me as a player, but you look at the important pieces to a puzzle of building a professional enterprise, and a lot of sports have missed. Those that have made it, and you look at the core four, they have commercialized around specific mediums. So the MLB really commercialized early, not around just local ballparks, but print and radio. And then the NFL was the property of television. And you're seeing kind of NBA find its way now across all mediums, but they've penetrated pop culture. And then you look at the UFC, which was kind of our simple way of describing our high-level strategy, is that Dana White and the Fertitta brothers looked at MMA and said, we can professionalize and commercialize. Now, they went through acquisition of UFC and changed rules and such to bring it to life. And there was a big, big learning curve for them, but now you see where they are. And so we looked at, going back to that product market fit comment, we looked at lacrosse as a sport that wasn't built from scratch. We didn't have to introduce it to fans everywhere. We had a core fan base. We certainly have a wider approach to capture net new fans, but let's commercialize and professionalize this thing. Our first path, as I've talked about with you before, was to try to acquire the former league, but we just ran into conflict. So we built one from scratch, and that required us to bring all the best players in the world over. We gave them better compensation structures. We also, because of our true single entity status, we gave them stock options in our company. And as a result, like, we began to build a bunch of momentum. And despite being, which we'll probably talk about, Angela, digitally and socially native in our strategy around that, many folks thought when we were putting together our distribution strategy that we were going to cut a deal with live streaming rights with an Amazon, Facebook, Apple, Google. But we went to NBC because broadcast television is still the holy grail for live sports. It's appointment watching. It's how the psychology of the viewer expects to tune in. And while fewer people may tune in for an entire 2-hour block than 20 years ago and 10 years ago, that is your holy grail. That's the essence of where all of the other content can be created. And I still firmly believe that.
So let's dive into that, though. Sorry, Paul. Holy Grail broadcast, because that's a really interesting, I think, segue into what we talk about fluid fans, and you guys have crushed it. You said, yes, we're on linear with NBC, but you've done things very differently, creating, miking up some of your players. Maybe you can give a little bit before you make your final point on kind of high level.
Yeah, and please, Angela, as you have done in our conversations at dinner, please interject, because I will continue to talk, as you know me, and I'm long-winded. There's so many.
I don't want people to miss the subtleties of how you said, yeah, we're going to go traditional, but we're going to do it better. And it doesn't mean always technology. It doesn't always mean, you didn't have to change the format in some ways, but you did. Or so some of our people viewing, they're trying to come up with solutions. The world is looking for innovation right now. And you did that last year, and you're continuing to do it this year. And I just want to make sure to highlight the things that you did. Yeah.
So, there's a reason why I'm not good for live TV either. Like, producers are like, this is a 2-minute segment, Paul, not a 20-minute. Production. So NBC is widely considered, especially as NBC Sports jumped ESPN2 as the second largest sports-specific consumed program in 83 million homes, behind the ESPN main, and then NBC is in 118 million homes. So we looked at distribution, we looked at kind of blue chip recognition, especially for a nascent stage sport. One of the first questions that comes up in a conversation with a stranger is, where can I watch the games? And it's no disrespect to the emerging OTT platforms, especially the sports-specific OTT platforms, but the mind still forgets, and this is what Amazon often says, we're not OTT. We're in more homes than most broadcast networks, but people still think of Amazon Prime as OTT. And that's what matters, I think, when it comes to business, when it comes to relationships. It's you got to understand the psyche of your consumer and how do they think. So when we say we're on NBC, when other properties say we're on ESPN, that resonates with people and you become real. And that's important for a nascent stage league like the PLL. Now, NBC also had a history of innovating with their properties, and they did so and are doing so with the NHL, and like, different technology trackers for players to improve the experience. And the NHL had a similar problem as the PLL, just as an aside, tracking the puck for a non-hockey fan, or in our case, a non-lacrosse fan, tracking the ball because it moves really fast. But as you said, we sit in production meetings with NBC, and they're so welcoming around changing where the game cam is. And if you watch an NFL broadcast, a game cam is that main camera that sees the snap on field, that sits in between the first and second level of stands. And you have your game cam, we lower that. We have slasher cams, we mic up our players. Instead of doing miking up audio in post, we turn it on live during the broadcast. There's a 7-second delay, so we can, muffle any like curse words, but our players are under instruction not to cuss when their mic's hot. So different things like that, where it feels risky for traditional broadcast networks, but it worked for us because people were excited about the inside access live.
Mm-hmm. So that's good to hear that your partner in NBC is open to doing things differently. I think that's one thing we talk about a lot with these new age fans. They want different experiences, they want new angles, they want to be empowered at the end of the day,
which we believe is really the most valuable piece, because not only in sports have it become more about the narrative and the experience of the athletes, but the experience of the fan and that relationship to the athlete. And most of that is largely created off of the game. And so you have to have, and you have to have that like precious piece in place. And then what we did, Mike and I, when we basically created our pro forma for the league, is our largest department still today, and our first department we scoped out and built, was an internal production house and creative services group. Because we felt like not only was the relatability and the distribution and the creative storyline content that we want to get out the most important thing, but we have to do it consistently across all modern mediums. Mm-hmm. That includes our PLL podcast audio suite, to social, how we operate on Instagram differently than Facebook, differently than Snapchat, TikTok, Twitter, YouTube. And those messages and those pieces of content are going out daily, not just through our league and team accounts, but then, as you had called out earlier, directly through our players. And we're able to use new technology to help our players create. So as an aside, we all know that athletes are really the most valuable asset when it comes to sports leagues, just like musicians are to the entertainment business. And the difference, though, what I've learned and what you and I have talked about before, is that not every athlete or not every entertainer is a great social media creator. And they don't have, production chops, and they don't don't spend as much time in understanding distribution techniques. So I've always felt it's incumbent on the league to help the athletes not only create that content, but educate them and provide them with services that they can distribute and help them grow. Because our view is never in conflict with the athletes, and that's why our athletes have stock options. And that's the case for a lot of other leagues. Our view is that if our athletes become superstars and world-class celebrities, then our league's going to grow. And so it shouldn't be a conflict. And so that's our approach to social and digital. And that's why we were attractive to a network like NBC and others who made a bid on us, is because we have, and I'll pass it back to you, a really good pulse on the fluid sports fan, in particular how millennials and Gen Zs consume sports, which is very different than a generation above us that was more of a hereditary or geographical fan.
Yep. Open to change, empowered to choose, and constantly evolving, as we define the fluid fan. They could be older, actually. They tend to trend younger, but it's the behaviors that they're mobile first in some cases. They want to interact, they want to create. You guys, I love it that not only have you empowered the athlete to benefit and given them the tools to be successful in this kind of fluid age of the fluid fan, but you've also gone and understood that fan in a way, and created all this amazing content off the field, which I love. I mean, you were kind enough to invite me to go to the season 1 here in Boston, and I got to see firsthand. Not only is it great on the field, but just the engagement outside. And as we think about bringing fans back, how you package this and deliver it to those at home, but also that are at the venue. You guys are kind of hitting the nail on all different fronts. Tell me then about how you think about, before we dive into what PLL is doing this season, how you think about uh, connecting to the fan? Like what's the story? Are you leaning more heavily on the field as like of athletes, or are you saying, no, this is all about who they are, and we're gonna use the tools and platform that we have to make them personalities?
Yeah, so it's a great question, and it's something that we sketch out blueprints around, and we have daily meetups with our marketing team and social team and our production house. And the thing is social changes every day. The algorithms are changing, and the goal should be to be prioritized at the top of a news feed for your fans who want to consume your content. I'll describe quickly the modern age, in particular, of quarantining and how the content is flooding the feeds right now. And take Instagram, is different. The consumption habits on Instagram are different, and they've evolved differently than YouTube or even Twitter. But right now, you can have an amazing piece of content that you upload to your Instagram feed. And Instagram right now is basically like whitewater rapids. It just is moving so fast. There's so much content coming in. And so your goal is to be strategic around when you publish something that's great, that it can get in front of as many of your fans as possible. That organic published piece of content can last. But there are times where it just gets flooded out and rushed downstream, and you look at your engagement, like, what happened? So I think there's strategy around that. We've deployed certain techniques around when you're uploading, how you're tagging, distribution that is inside the distribution, like your DMs, and understanding posts that are being shared, and then how to necessarily promote content that's doing really well to have it do even better than that. As far as pieces of content, just like the Holy Grail in sports, the most shared content are highlights, and those captivating moments, those last second shots.
You had a nice players. April Fool's joke recently.
Yeah. So that is like kind of aside, but so we have, you have your sports content, and then you have the creative stuff. So April Fool's hit, as you had mentioned, we leaned in as a league to telling our story of expansion last year. And so we expanded from a 6-team to a 7-team league just after our first season. And then we engaged our fans around naming the team. So we went out and said, what do you guys think? And announced it live on a podcast called Part of Take. And we ended up with the Water Dogs, and a lot of logic that went into understanding the sports landscape, from your traditional leagues to minor league baseball. Minor league baseball has some of the best per cap numbers on merchandise sales and some of the most abstract logos, but fans love them. So we have to be really objective around where to go. So we named our team, but there were a lot of other great suggestions. And one that caught some social waves from the UGC side of our audience was Beans Lacrosse Club. So we registered that back in January and said we might come revisit. And when April Fool's started coming around, we were certainly in a trepid time here with COVID, but so we were delicate around, should we do this? We were planning to do it. We decided that humor in difficult times and following trends, humor is the most engaged with piece of content right now, which is healthy for us to help get through a lot of challenges. So we launched on April 1st, our 8th lacrosse club, and we called it Beans Lacrosse Club, but we rolled out a really robust strategy. So we did website takeovers. We had Beans merch set up on our online store. We had an Instagram account, Twitter account. We reached out to those folks to verify those accounts. So people knew it was a joke, but it felt real. And I think that's why it became one of our biggest days.
Yeah, you had me going for sure. All right, let's dive right in. What are you guys doing this season? You mentioned you're the first North American league to declare. You're going back without fans. Obviously, walk us through what that looks like. Again, a lot of what our hackathon is about is this. You're going to have sports. It's not going to have the fans. As an athlete myself, looking up into the stands, feeling that atmosphere, you're going to miss that as a player. What do you expect from this? Certainly going to keep the brand going and the league going, but what is your expectation? And first, I just commend you on going ahead and being able to quarantine the league. And to your point of in bad times, humor is great, but we're also dying for sports because it's a place that we can get entertained, escaped, and learn, see the role models that you guys have on the field.
Yeah. So we basically, and for all the folks that are on the call, you can probably relate to this, but over the last 9 weeks, we basically went into deep research mode. So Mike and I and our executive team were working 80-hour weeks, and we were consuming as much content and information as possible from internal resources, from medical resources, documentation from hedge funds, predictive analysis economically around what's going to happen with COVID, to certainly most importantly medical. We found our way into access points with the CDC, World Health Organization, the White House Sports Committee Task Force, and our goal out of the gates was to understand first, like, is this possible? And then once April came around, we realized quickly that a fanless model was the foregone conclusion. But then became about how can you keep your players safe? And we had two advantages. The first is that we have power in fewer numbers. We only have 7 teams. So if you look at our quarantined model, which is fully quarantined, where you're hearing other leagues discuss is single site, where there is still environmental exposure to everyone involved. A fully quarantined model means you go into one location, one campus, and you buy out that campus and you're on lockdown through the entirety of the tournament. And there are a series of COVID tests and PPE and cleansing tactics that take place for all participants and the site prior to it turning on. And you get through those first 2 phases, everyone's on, and it's a safer event. So we had the ability to do that because of our fewer teams relative to other sports leagues. And the other is, I just think we're still in operating mode and entrepreneurially speaking, that's an advantage. We just built this league differently, as we talked about to start the call, just a year and a half ago. So this was kind of back to normal for us, recreating a model. And I think there hasn't been enough conversation around how difficult that is for the NBA, for Major League Baseball, for Major League Soccer, and the NFL to sit back and say, we have to recreate this system that has tens of thousands of pages and agreements already anchored in for 5 years into the future,
Yep.
and like restructuring everything from PA deals down. So it's a lot of work, but we landed on this model, and quickly, our goal in every league is you're conceding gate receipts, you're conceding concession and parking and local sponsorship activation because of fanless. So we're shifted for 2020, as all leagues are, into a viewership and sponsorship business, and that's it.
Mm-hmm.
So our focus internally is how do we drive tune in? How can we capitalize now with this concentrated 2-week slate of games to explode from a viewership standpoint, capture net new sports fans, and then how can we integrate sponsors differently? So taking this individual sport, this action sports approach, maybe we have company logos on our field. Maybe we're putting company logos on helmets, which is considered pretty sacred in team sports. And so doing things differently because this time is just different. We've never experienced it.
Yeah, no, I love it. You went in with an innovative mindset. To your point, you know, of 10,000 page playbook, which is why I love your league and startup leagues. You can do things differently. You don't have the same strings attached, and you just have this innovative mindset. It's great advice, I think, for this group too, that again, take out ticket sales. What are the drivers of revenue for you guys? What is the driver of growth for you, given the context of no fans in the stands? Do you have any advice for our group in terms of, I'm sure you're getting pitched a million ideas now. Hey, you're not going to have fans in the stands, but I've got this tool, I've got this functionality.
I get
like
dozens of emails a day.
You're like, I can't, and so everyone here is trying to bubble up through that confusion. And what are the things you're actually looking for, kind of in a strategic way, if you're going to deliver on those sponsors and sort of your broadcast and, on digital partners? What are the things that would actually elevate in your mind?
So we are really focused on creating the fan experience from home, as kind of intimate and as exciting as it would be as if they're in the stands. So there's technology out there that can take live feeds from a second screen experience of a family or a person watching the games on their television from their mobile device and then project that on site. We're looking at bringing fans into locker rooms virtually before games, and we're looking at hosting parties. And you look at technology platforms like the one we're on, Zoom, or the way Google has evolved their Hangouts, or a platform like Tagboard that worked with the NFL and the NFL draft. You know, we've seen a ton of different leagues now exploring different forms of projecting the fans on the field. It is different. Your call out, what we've looked at even with late night television in late March without an audience, seems like the jokes hit less.
Yeah.
And, you know, the WWE without an audience felt really like a male soap opera.
Yeah.
And the UFC, I think, was unique because they took a tighter shot on broadcast, and you could actually feel the kicks more and the punches, which for a fighting fan, that felt more engaging. But even, and then I think transparency, like Joe Rogan got a lot of heat for bringing it to life by being like, you know, wave to no one here after the fight when he was celebrating with one of the athletes. So there's like humor and transparency that's involved. So you've got to figure out, Bundesliga blew out their ratings. It was the highest rated event last weekend, set of games, but it did feel eerie because there was no air in the stands when someone scored. So how do you create? And I think what the Chinese Basketball Association first did by putting big fans in stands, and then Bundesliga allowing fans to send in images of themselves, and then they built cardboard cutouts of that fan. If you're at home, you're like, there I am in the stands. That's an intimate experience that we're looking at.
And they charged for that. I think it was $20. I mean, they're making some money.
$20. Yeah, I mean, there's costs that go into, you know, the printing business is back on.
Yeah.
So,
all right. So I'm sure there's a lot of ideas out there. You've been
yeah.
super generous with your time, Paul. Is there anything, words of advice that you would give this group, or listeners that are thinking about starting a league or trying to connect better to the fluid fan? I mean, you've not only from an athlete perspective crushed it, obviously you and your brother have launched this league, and just your approach to COVID and being super nimble in terms of thinking about let's make the show go on, we'll do it differently, being open to change, which is obviously a hallmark of innovation. Do you have any words of advice, a way that you approach life, or that they could even approach this hackathon?
Well, I would just say even that the way you laid out that question is probably the best advice. You hit on a lot of things. For me, just hearing how this conversation has gone, even in the last 5 minutes, a big piece of the folks that are listening in are entrepreneurs themselves that have technology that they want to showcase or integrate into leagues. The biggest thing is getting that attention. You know, I get dozens of emails on new tech platforms a day, and I'll just tell you that I can relate to you as as entrepreneurs out there, because we're still a nascent stage league, and I'm constantly trying to change the way that I'm cold outreaching others, and the way that I'm scripting my emails and figuring out ways to cold call and have conversations, because I know that at the core of what you do is a really great product. And the biggest challenge out of the gates is to share that message with a decision maker. So be resilient there and constantly take inventory of your strategies, those that work, those that don't work, and be open, as Angela said, to evolving that message block. So that's the first part. And then second is realizing that during times that are challenging, whether they're full-blown economic crisis, a global pandemic that none of us have experienced to this nature in our lifetimes, there also lies within opportunity. And those who can take advantage of that opportunity are often those who are smaller and more nimble. And we realized that pretty early on, that, while we love to be the NBA and the NFL and Major League Baseball and MLS, we hope to be there one day. Right now, as painful as it is, as unpredictable and challenging, we are actually in an advantaged position because we are faster to make decisions. We have less legacy to deal with. And I think for all of you out there, my message would be to continue to keep that top of mind, harness your persistence and resiliency, because it's hard. I tell our team, I get 20 to 30 no's before a yes, and we celebrate the yeses, and I project them on social media, and everyone thinks our business is a yes business. It's not. So we're in there with you. Hang in there and believe in your product, and continue to change your messaging, and know that there's real opportunity right now.
I love it. True entrepreneur. Paul Rabil, co-founder of the Premier Lacrosse League. I'm definitely tuning into every single one of the PLL Championship Series, powered by Ticketmaster.
Amazing.
It's 2 weeks, which is kind of nice. Again, fluid fans, they have attentions. You just got to do it. I hate this
Yeah.
argument that their attention spans are short. Well, they are if your product sucks. Yours, on the other hand,
Yeah.
you're bringing sports to life. You and your brother, and just your approach to life, Paul. Consider you a friend and an innovator in the space. So I'm so happy, so blessed, so grateful that you were able to spend some time with our leaders in the hackathon and the sports industry at large. Thanks so much for tuning in.
Feelings mutual, Angela. Thanks for having me. And I agree. I think our attention is worth fighting for, each of us. And it's actually the platforms that have shortened our attention span by the way that they produce their product. But thank you for tuning in. 20 games in 16 days, and we're calling it 20 for 2020. So we'll be sharing more of that message in the future. But July 25th to August 9th.
All right. Well, and we'll be sure to promote it as we always do. Talk about what you guys are doing, because again, as we are an independent, research company focused on innovation and technology and sport. You guys are clearly leading the way in a number of fronts, and we love having you on and talking about all the innovation that's going on at the PLL, and I know that starts with you, Paul. So congrats on all your success.
Thanks, Angela.